When will there be economic growth again? And what can the politicians do to create jobs?
I think we at the IMF, we're convinced there can be growth again. We think Europe is on the right adjustment path. We have to remember we've been through a very deep downturn, and we understand fully there is a concern about whether we can go back to previous eras of higher growth. But I think what it requires is that politicians keep on the reform path, keep at their efforts, particularly at the national levels, because there are countries which are facing very severe contractions, and there we think the reform efforts will need to be strengthened.
Right now, I'm worried about the future of my children. I'm wondering if, in a few years from now, if they'll be able to find a job.
I have to say we are all very concerned about unemployment, especially among the young. Okay? It is unacceptably high, and policy efforts everywhere need to address this problem, both at the national level, at the euro area level. Okay? Part of it will come from national, more flexible labor markets. And what I mean by that is allowing young people to enter the labor market at a competitive rate and not to be disadvantaged by existing workers. Practices that keep existing workers in jobs and keep the others outside. But I also have to say that ultimately it's economic growth that will generate more jobs, including for young people. And for that, there's a whole range of issues that we're addressing, and the European policymakers are addressing, particularly the area of allowing credit to flow to enterprises so they can employ more people. Okay? And this is to do with making sure the financial markets are working properly and banks are performing the function they are meant to.
Are all these banks in really good shape, or does the state have to give more and more money for bank rescues and the banks can basically do whatever they want?
I think there's a problem of perception. Across the euro area there's a disparity. There are areas where banks are perceived to be very weak, and those banks are having difficulty borrowing money and then lending money at competitive rates. So they're not really able to perform a function. What we need, and the European officials are fully on board on this, they are about to embark on an exercise to assess the quality of banks' capital. And in that exercise, they will be able to identify where there are capital needs. But the really important thing to emphasize is that those capital needs are not going to come from the taxpayer only. They're going to come from private shareholders, from private capital markets, from private investors. And only as a last resort will there be a need for public sector money, but in very limited scale. So the whole exercise is designed to make sure that the taxpayers' investment in banks is limited.
Is it appropriate to have a banking union when fiscal consolidation isn't complete?
Yes, I think it's best to start by asking what would a banking union address? What is the problem that it would address? Right now what we see in Europe is very high borrowing rates in parts of the euro area and the periphery relative to, say, countries like Germany. Okay. The European Central Bank sets an interest rate which should in principle be applicable around the euro area, but right now it's not. Their low interest rates are not being transmitted to some countries like the periphery. That's because the banks and the sovereigns in the periphery are very tightly linked. We need to break that link. You ask about fiscal consolidation. Fiscal consolidation is a long-term thing. It will take time. It's ongoing. Okay? How will the banking union help? If we can get borrowing rates down in the periphery, we can get households and corporations to borrow at more reasonable rates. That would strengthen their balance sheets. That would allow them to grow. That would also, by the way, strengthen the public sector's finances. Okay? So that actually helps fiscal consolidation.